Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we finished up Parshat Vayakhel yesterday. So we're going to be back into Torah Temimah this morning and we're in Parshat Noach, and we are talking about this really significant verse that we came across. So that essentially, after the experience of the flood and coming out of the flood safely, Noah offers up offerings to God. He builds an altar and he offers up offerings of the pure animals. And God, this is the point it goes on to say, Vayomer Hashem, or I should say this, Vayarach Hashem edreach hanichoach. The Lord inhaled the delightful fragrance. Vayomer Hashem elibo, and the Lord said in his heart, Lo osif lekalel, I will no longer curse od et ha'adama, the earth, ba'avur ha'adam, on account of man, ki yetzer lev, because the devisings of a man's heart, or the desires of a man's heart, ra min urav, are wicked from his youth up. Okay. V'lo osif od lahakot et kol chai, and I will no longer strike all living things, kasher asiti, as I did. So, first of all, of course, who created God? Who created man? God created man, and God created man with this Yetzer HaTov, and this Yetzer haRa, with this good and evil inclination, and yet we have to understand that part of having an evil inclination gives our life purpose. That one of the purposes of living is to be able to see ourselves, to discover who we really are, to be able to determine what side of us is something that we need to overcome and discipline. And in a sense, that is a very key element of finding significance as a human being. That had man been born without any Yetzer haRa, there'd be no purpose at all to being created in the first place. And that, I realize, is not a simple argument. It may take some deep thought to realize the validity of that argument, but that is essentially it. But at the same time, God is saying that he's giving us a break, that awareness that he created us in this particular way means that God recognizes the need to express God's love of creation by giving us a break on that level. And I think that it's possible to see the level of rebellion that exists in the world, and at the very least, the lack of appreciation for the nature of this world and for its creator, for the fact that something brought this into existence, that something gives us the ability to be conscious, that something gives us something outside of all of reality, of perceived reality, allows us to perceive reality. And of course, I'm talking about a concept of transcendence. So this is a very, very significant verse here, because it's really talking about a very primary dynamic between the divine and this world in which we live. So here we are in the Torah Temimah. Ki Yetzer, right? Ki Yetzer lev hadam, because the desiring or the imaginings of a human being, something like that, or the inclination. So here's the verse, and this is from Tractate Sukkah. Shiv'ah shemot leYetzer haRa. That the evil inclination, I think we could basically say that it's equivalent to Freud's id. Okay, this is the model of human personality, right? There are 7 names that this Yetzer haRa, that this evil inclination, this self-destructive inclination within us has 7 names. V'hakadosh Baruch Ha kar'o Ra, and the Holy One, blessed be He, called it, right, Ra, wicked, evil, bad. And of course, that has to do with the fact that if we allow this to control our behavior, this appetite of ours to control us, we are going to destroy ourselves. So anyway, there's the one name, Ra. Shneimar, as it states, Ki Yetzer Lev Ha'adam Ra, right? Because the devisings of the heart of man are wicked. Right. We all know we have our dark side. Every single human being has a dark side. And the real question is, are we able to, A, recognize our dark side as a dark side? And number two, are we willing not to let it control us? And it's not simple. It's not a light switch. So, to eat bichlal. Sorry, let me make sure. 1 second. I think I'm in the wrong place here. This looks to me like Yud Dalet, so I need to look for Yud Dalet. Let me find it. This is what we did the other time. So let me move this to Yud Dalet right here. Here we go. Let me make sure I'm covering everything that we need to. Yes. Okay. Uvesugya, and in this particular passage, that he's quoting from Sukkah. This is the particular Talmudic passage, right? Chashiv Yeter Hashemot, the enumerated, the rest of the names. Remember, it said 7 names, so the remaining 6 names are enumerated. Moshe Karo Arael, so Moses refers to it as uncircumcised. Kamosha Amar, and there's of course, a support for how we get that. Kish Amar, as he states, Umaltem et orlat levavchem, you shall circumcise the foreskin of your hearts. Right. The stubbornness, whatever that represents, it also represents, I think, the animal side of us, right? To not just be animalistic or animals, act like animals. David, King David, Karo Tameh, he refers to the Yetzer haRa as impure. Kamosha Katuv, as is written in Tehillim, that's the book of Psalms 51, and of course the book of Psalms is attributed to King David. Lev Tahor Brali, create within me a pure heart. And let's see, Elohim, O Lord, Miklal, and so that implies the Ika Tameh. It implies that the heart is capable of being impure. So this idea of impurity, we are deepening our understanding, as it were, of this particular area within Jewish thought. Shlomo, King Solomon, Karo Soneh, he called it one who hates, right? A hater. Kamosha Katuv, as is written. Mishlei is the book of Proverbs, chapter 25. Again, Proverbs is attributed to King Solomon. Im ra'ev son echa, right? If your hate, the one who hates you, is hungry. So again, referring to the appetite, right? So interesting that this particular element within us represents appetite and how we learn to control our appetites. And so you can see that the laws of kashrut are a very basic way in which to control our appetites. Yeshayahu, Isaiah, Karo Michshol, he refers to this as the stumbling block. Kamosha Katuv, as is written, and this is chapter 57 in Isaiah, Harimu Michshol, lift up the stumbling block. In other words, remove the stumbling block. It is these are all ways in which to look at this element within ourselves, that element that I'm calling the dark side, and to try and not allow it to control ourselves and also ultimately to destroy our lives. And of course, we know that it can destroy the lives of people who are related to us, who are connected to us. Yechezkel Karo, so Ezekiel referred to it as Evan, as a stone, Kamosha Katuv, and this is chapter 36 in Ezekiel. V'hasiroti, and I shall remove et lev ha'evan, your heart of stone. Again, these are wonderful metaphors to describe the kinds of emotions that go along with this kind of appetite that is self-destructive. Yoel, the prophet Joel, Karo Tzafoni, he referred to it as the northerner. Now, Tzafoni can also refer to a type of locust that comes from the north. And again, if you think about locusts and how they just are voracious and just wipe out an entire area of food, right? Voraciousness. Likewise, we know that it can lead to addiction. These kinds of things can lead us to addictive behavior and just really destroy ourselves. Kemoshe Katuv, as is written, this is chapter 2, Ve'et hatzfoni archik me'alechem, and the tzafoni I will distance from you. So northerner could refer, of course, sometimes Babylon is referred, or Babylonia is referred to as in the north of Israel. It's actually, of course, northeast, but it also could mean this locust that God would remove from them, and understanding it now as a metaphor. And in fact, he says, one needs to look more carefully. Lama lo chashiv, why is not counted, right? We've enumerated these other names, and why don't they count gam shenikra rasha? It's also referred to as a wicked one rasha, as opposed to ra, right? It's rasha is more like a person that's wicked. Ra just means evil, right? Kemoshe Katuv, as is stated, Sofer Rasha Latzadik. The wicked one looks out at the righteous. In other words, devises evil against the righteous person. And again, when one is speaking metaphorically, we're talking about our evil inclination that tries to subvert the good inclination within us, right? And this is Tehillim, the book of Psalms, Psalm 37. V'darshu al zeh, and besugya kan, and they made a drash, right? They interpreted regarding this in this sugya, in this Talmudic discussion here. And this looks like, let me double check. I'm not sure if this is Amud Beit. It could mean on the B side of the page, right? Because the reference is to Sukkah, page 52. And Ayin Bet would be 72. That's a long, long sugya. So I think what he's talking about is, because this is Sukkah, page 52, on the A page, the one side of the page, and Amud Bet would be on the other side of the page. Yitzro shel Adam, right? Mitgaber alav, that this evil inclination of a person overpowers him bechol yom, every day. Right, it tries to overpower him, umevakesh lahamito, and tries to kill him. In other words, there's a connection between this, again, self-destructive, right? It tries to destroy him. V'tzarich lomar, and one needs to say, deshem zeh, that this term, that is to say, rasha, right? Kalul b'shem ra, that it's actually included in the noun ra, wickedness, shekaro hakadosh baruch hu, which the Holy One, blessed be He, termed it. K'mevu'ar lefanenu, as is clarified before us, the imkain, as we just clarified, the imkain lo chidesh David shem zeh, and in that case, even though remember it's a reference to Psalms, Psalm 37, which is of course would be David, so David did not add something new. This particular term, ulechein lo chashvuhu, and that's the reason why the Talmud doesn't count it as one of the terms mentioned. Ulefi hamitba'er chashvum chazal l'shem echad, and as is clarified, the sages of blessed memory, chazal, Chochmeinu Zichronam Livracha, our sages of blessed memory, counted it, that is Ra and Rasha, as one term, one term. Uva aleh halashon, and he's saying, and possibly he means grammarians, perhaps, or linguists. Hishtadlu limtso hevdel. They attempted to find some distinction bein shnei hashemot ha'ela, between these two names, ve'ein laha'arich, and it's not necessary to go into any further details regarding this subject. He feels he has dealt with this sufficiently. So, going.
Rabbi,
Yes, please.
since this is, okay, so one of the things you've said so far was that if we didn't have to, wrestle with the evil inclination,
Yes. Yes.
there would be no point in having people.
Right. No purpose in creation.
No purpose in creation.
Right.
And, the whole, the Rasha in the Seder.
Yes. Yes.
And the Haggadah.
Right.
Has always been a problem for me.
Yes.
Just because it's so, I get if you separate yourself and deny that you're a part of, you're turning wayward and not Godward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the word bad and evil has been so used as a weapon. And
yeah.
And
right.
And we say Kain Yehi Ratzon.
Yes.
I think that really means may our urges be for what God wills, not for our own
right
individual Yetzer haRa purposes. I guess I'd like you to say something about how this has been used in Jewish thought and practice.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Judith, of course, you raise a very, very important issue regarding religiosity. Okay. And I think the example that you gave of Kain Yehi Ratzon is a wonderful thing. It is like a little protection saying that we know that we don't have complete knowledge about anything, that our knowledge actually is infinitesimal compared to all the possibilities that might exist, and that there is a hope that what we are doing and the decision we're making is something that is favorable on a cosmic dimension. Having said that, there is no doubt, and I suspect you might be referring to this, that there are many evil things that have been practiced in the name of religion. And that's something that is a tragedy, that people can use religion to commit acts that are vile. And that's perhaps an understatement. One just has to think of the Spanish Inquisition. But even to this day, there are people who it's not only in the realm of religion, but in general of people who are quick to make judgments, and to cast things black and white, etc. I think that, so there are a few things that I'd like to try and, if I can collect my thoughts, say about it. One is that there are two statements that I love that I think in some ways are touchstones regarding the value of a religious decision. One is, and in terms of how we treat other people or judge other people, one is the most foundational statement that says that human beings are created in the divine image, and to recognize that even a murderer is nevertheless created in the divine image. that doesn't mean that you cannot have justice. We have. You know that Judaism spends a lot of time, and the Torah spends a lot of time in terms of trying to put feet to what justice is about. That it has to do with fairness, it has to do with equity. The prophets are constantly speaking about this kind of thing, the need to be just. Justice should not be, by definition, punitive per se. What justice tries to do, the word tzedek, has to do with basically equalization, of setting things straight and fairly, and to make sure that if somebody has done something wrong, they have the opportunity to correct that wrong. That might be it might involve, unfortunately, capital punishment. But nevertheless, and I realize, of course, the word punishment implies punitive. But what it does say is that there is a responsibility, right, an accountability that we all have for our lives. But still, even a criminal, and there's statements well in the Talmud about how you treat a criminal, should not be treated disrespectfully. There is nothing, it is not contradictory to bring someone to justice, but at the same time to treat that person respectfully. And these are statements that are there in the tradition very strongly. Okay, so that's one thing. And the other piece, of course, is Hillel's famous statement where he was asked to teach Torah while the man was standing on one foot, and he said, it is this principle, what is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. And one sees so many examples of a violation of that principle that even regarding the attribution of religious principles, that people sometimes use religion to justify a behavior that contradicts that particular principle, where they feel justified in doing what they're doing, but they wouldn't want to be treated that way themselves. And I realize there are exceptions. There are people who don't mind being treated badly, who think that that's somehow cool. But by and large, I mean, every general statement is going to have exceptional situations. But by and large, that is a great principle. And Hillel says the rest is commentary. That doesn't mean that it's not important. But what it does mean is that that principle is a touchstone. That if you are violating that principle, you should not be doing it. And even doing that in the name of religion, if you are treating someone the way you wouldn't want to be treated yourself, and you're doing it in the name of religion, it's a contradiction in terms. So as you can see, I've gone on and on and on about this, but I'd like to stop and give you a chance, to comment. But this is sort of the way in which I've tried to understand this.
How central has that statement, evaluation, etc., from Hillel, how central has that been to Jewish thought?
I can't really answer that question because trying to speak of, I mean, I would say it is central. The fact that it is in the Talmud, that it is a well-known story, I think does make it central. Of course, we know that there's many a slip twixt cup and lip. How central that's been in the actual practice, I think depends on the community, on the individual leader, on a whole bunch of other factors. I would like to say one other thing. Remember, we have the written law. The written law, as you know, I've come to the conclusion, the subtext of the written law is doing what doesn't come naturally, right? Because what comes naturally is the Yetzer haRa. The Yetzer haRa is perfectly natural, and the Torah comes to try and protect us against the Yetzer haRa and doing what comes naturally. Because as I said, and I've said it, right, what comes naturally can be self-destructive. That's the written Torah. But on the other hand, you have this voluminous amount of material that constitutes the oral Torah. And the subtext of the oral Torah is circumstances alter cases. That that you cannot simply have rigid rules. You have to look at the various circumstances that surround that particular situation, and then, take the basic principle, make sure that you're still upholding that basic principle. But if you need to make exceptions, you have to allow for those exceptions. And I would add that I realize that within the written Torah, believe it or not, there are examples of what I would call oral Torah. And the very nature, the very essence of oral Torah has to do with the fact that, the written law is up on Mount Sinai, but trying to bring that written law down into the world of reality and all the various situations that impinge on realistic situations is the oral law. So that the oral law, in fact, is what we use to bring what's in principle, idealistic, and take it from just idealism into reality. And that's why it's so important.
What might be an example of that in the Torah?
So the example that I would give you is in Pesach, right? One of the very first laws given has to do with the Pesach offering. And they talk about the fact that the Pesach lamb needs to be entirely consumed by the family, right? And it talks about each family taking a lamb. And then the Torah goes on to say that if the family isn't large enough to consume an entire lamb, because it's so important to make sure that that entire lamb is consumed, they can subscribe to a lamb with another family. That's already introducing oral law, because it's saying, well, yes, ideally should be one family to a lamb, but sometimes families aren't that very big, and there's too much lamb for them to be able to consume the entire lamb. And this is just a wonderful example, by the way. So you can subscribe with another family so that you can eat the entire lamb. Having said that, the Torah goes on to say that the entire lamb must be consumed by midnight, okay? And then goes on to say, but if there is any lamb left, right? It's supposed to be consumed by midnight, the entire lamb. But if any of it's left until the morning, it needs to be burnt. Wonderful other example. That stuff happens. Yes, you want to consume the entire lamb, but you may still not, even with that other family, you may not be able to do it. So what do you do in that case? And the Torah tells you it needs to be burnt the next morning. There's examples of oral law right there in the Torah.
Thank you.
There are other examples too. I can't think of them just offhand like this. By the way, we do have an example. How about the daughters of Tzlavchad? According to the laws, of inheritance, the inheritance goes down a male line. And here we have a family where all he had was daughters. And there's a discussion as to what do you do in that case, right? So the
Yes.
answer is you give it to daughter. There's an example of oral law.
Thank you.
So there are more than that. I assure you, there are any number of examples.
Yeah, I just wanted to be, by example,
Right. No, I
clear what
do
you
that.
thought was that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
Thank you.
of course, I mean, it is such, Judith, as you know already, I don't have to say it, but I will say it anyway. I love this. I love this religion. I think there is such wisdom. I wish I were more knowledgeable than I am. I know, and I wish I could practice better than I do, but I hope Kain Yehi Ratzon, right? At least may it be somehow, to some extent, pleasing to God. And by the way, it talks about that sweet fragrance that God, inhaled. It has more to do with our behavior. In other words, it was the fact that Noah cared enough to want to express that gratitude that was the sweet fragrance. So, yeah. Whenever we practice mitzvot, right, we are actually offering up an offering. Doesn't involve necessarily killing an animal, but to recognize just how beautiful and perfect, in the sense of wanting to help us perfect ourselves as human beings. So, okay. Thank you for your question, Judith. And thank you, Kathy. Thank you for being here too. Take care. Peace. I'm going to stop the recording.